He looked like he'd just wandered in from the parking lot. "This table is for donors, not delivery boys," Claire announced, loud enough for everyone to hear, but Keanu Reeves didn't flinch. He didn't need to because what happened next would shatter every assumption in the room and leave Clare Vaughn wishing she'd never spoken a word. Before we dive into this unbelievable story, let us know where you're watching from. Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you're new here, don't forget to subscribe and hit that bell. You won't want to miss what comes next. That night, London shimmered. The Royal Albion Grand Ballroom was draped in cascading crystal chandeliers and walls lined with midnight silk. Gilded columns reached toward the ceiling like a cathedral. Outside, Bentleys and Rolls-Royces glided over cobblestones. This was the Royal Horizon Gala, hosted by Prince William himself. An invitation meant you belonged, and Claire had never doubted that. She stepped out of her chauffeured car, her silver gown glinting under the flashes of paparazzi cameras. But as she entered, her confidence faltered. There, standing beneath the marble archway, was a man who didn't belong. He wore a simple black t-shirt, dark jeans, and plain sneakers. No suit, no tie, no pretense. Claire's heels clicked sharply as she approached. "Is there a side entrance for deliveries?" she asked a staffer sweetly, nodding toward Keanu. But before the staffer could reply, Keanu's invitation beeped. "Valid approved, priority access." He walked past the rope without a word. Claire's smile faded. Inside, the ballroom was bathed in golden light. An orchestra swelled as Claire moved toward the VIP tables near the stage, her gown sweeping behind her like a curtain of silver. A butler gestured to her seat. And there, already seated beside her place card, calmly sipping water, was the man in the t-shirt. Keanu Reeves glanced up as she approached and offered a polite nod. Claire froze, a cold sting of uncertainty piercing her usual composure. Table 1 sparkled under the chandelier's glow-polished silver, etched crystal, and a centerpiece of white orchids flown in from Kyoto, but all she could see was him. His presence was plain, quiet, and utterly out of place. Her eyes dropped to the place card beside hers. It was blank except for the printed word guest. "I didn't realize there were seating staff at the main table now," she said lightly, sliding into her chair. Keanu looked over, calm and neutral. "I was invited," he said softly. Claire offered a tight smile. "Oh, I'm sure you were. I just didn't expect the dress code to bend this much." He didn't respond, didn't look embarrassed. He simply returned to the wine menu as if she weren't there. The silence was infuriating. Claire's smile sharpened. She lifted her champagne flute, her voice carrying just enough to be overheard. "You know, it used to mean something to sit at this table. Now I suppose it just means you replied quickly enough." Keanu Reeves glanced up. "Maybe it still means something," he said, his tone impossibly calm. "Just not to the same people." Claire blinked, thrown not by his words, but by his stillness. She leaned closer, her voice a weapon disguised as civility. "Look, I'm not judging. I just think traditions matter. Decorum, presentation. This isn't a pub quiz night." Still, he gave no reaction. Across the table, a banker from Zurich leaned over. "Friend of yours?" Claire smirked. "Oh no, I'm assuming someone slipped him in as part of the entertainment. A social experiment for the prince's amusement." Perhaps the banker chuckled uncomfortably, but Keanu said nothing. He refused to play her game, and for Clare Vaughn that was intolerable. Before we continue, let us know you're still with us. Drop a number 3 in the comments if you're enjoying the story so far. And don't forget to subscribe for more twists you won't see coming. The second course arrived, and Claire decided subtlety was over. Baron Langley was swirling his burgundy, telling a tedious story about vineyards. Claire laughed politely, then turned her attention back to Keanu Reeves. He was still there, still quiet, still in that black t-shirt like it was a conscious act of defiance. She leaned toward Langley, ensuring her voice carried. "Isn't it fascinating how minimal effort is becoming fashionable? You could show up in gym clothes and still be called authentic." Langley, 3 glasses in, chuckled. "Strategic humility, they call it." Claire's eyes never left Keanu. "Ah, yes. I do love strategy, though. I always thought humility came with manners." Her fork clinked against her plate. "Would you like me to ask the kitchen for a spare jacket? Something more appropriate?" Keanu looked up, held her gaze for a beat too long, then calmly took a sip of water. He said nothing. The restraint was maddening. The air shifted. Guests exchanged glances. Lord Ainsworth raised an eyebrow. "Friend of yours?" Claire smirked. "Oh no," but apparently, being mysterious isn't fashion again. The ballroom lights dimmed as the auctioneer took the stage. A hush fell over the crowd. Claire leaned back, bored. She had seen it all before, donors pretending to compete. The auction began. A signed first edition, an oil painting from a French collection. Then, from the corner of her eye, Claire saw it. Keanu Reeves calmly raised his paddle. She turned sharply. "Oh," she said loudly. "How bold of you." Applause followed, brief and polite. Claire leaned toward Keanu, her voice now low and venomous. "I do hope they accept payments in monthly installments." This time, he turned his head slowly. He met her eyes, calm and still. "I think I'll manage," he whispered, And just like that, something shifted. It wasn't in his words, but in the stillness that followed. The surrounding chatter faltered. A woman across the room glanced over, brows furrowed. Lord Ainsworth blinked as if trying to remember something. Claire, for the first time that evening, felt eyes on her for the wrong reason, but she still smiled, sipped her champagne, foolishly believing she had won. The applause faded. Claire waved over a waiter. "Be a dear and ask the event coordinator to stop by. There may have been a seating error." The waiter nodded. Beside her, Keanu was folding his bidding card, tucking it into a pocket. A jacket he didn't wear, Claire noted, because he didn't own one. She turned to him, speaking as if to an old acquaintance. "Don't misunderstand me. I admire your confidence. But you must see how this looks." He raised an eyebrow. "Like what?" "Like someone wandered into a Monet with muddy boots." There was a cold pause. He didn't answer. He didn't need to. A moment later, the event coordinator arrived, young, nervous, overdressed. Claire smiled with practiced warmth. "Darling, there may be a minor confusion. This gentleman doesn't seem to have a place card. I just want to ensure he's not been mistakenly seated." The coordinator's face paled. He checked his clipboard, fingers moving too fast. "Ma'am, I'm afraid I can't disclose guest arrangements, but he's exactly where he's meant to be." Claire's lips twitched. "Of course, forgive me," she said, her voice like fragile porcelain. The coordinator bowed and retreated. Claire turned back to her wine. "Protocol is dying, isn't it?" she murmured. Then she reached for her clutch, tapped into her phone, and sent a quick text to a foundation aide suggesting a seating shift for optics. Across the table, Lord Ainsworth glanced at her, then at Keanu, then looked away entirely. The silence thickened. Then, the waiter returned not with champagne, but with a folded note. He leaned down, whispered to Claire, and slipped the paper into her hand. She opened it, read the 5 words, and froze. What did the note say, and what happens when Prince William enters? Don't go anywhere. Subscribe and hit the bell because the twist you've been waiting for is just moments away. There, in crisp typeface, were 5 words. Please stop. He's the owner. Claire's heart stuttered. Her throat went dry. She folded the note carefully, not letting her expression change, but inside, her mind raced. Owner. Owner of what? The painting, the auction, the room. The moment she thought she had control was crumbling beneath her. Quietly, she glanced at Keanu Reeves. He hadn't moved, hadn't seen the note. Or perhaps he had and simply didn't care. He was finishing his glass of water, one hand resting lightly on the table. Suddenly, Claire felt heat rising to her cheeks. For the first time all night, she was the one unsure if she belonged. The lights dimmed again, this time with purpose. The orchestra faded into an expectant silence. From the far end of the ballroom, a spotlight flickered, then settled on the grand staircase lined with royal blue. Gasps fluttered through the crowd like falling silk. Prince William appeared at the top step, dressed in a classic midnight blue tuxedo. Poised and calm, he descended with effortless grace. Conversation ceased. Forks were set down. Champagne flutes paused midair. Claire straightened in her seat. This was her moment, her chance to be seen again as the face of grace and composure. The prince stepped onto the stage, took the mic, and smiled. "Ladies and gentlemen," Prince William began, his voice smooth and commanding. "Thank you for being here tonight. Your generosity and continued support mean the world not only to this foundation but to every life it touches." Soft applause followed. Claire folded her hands on the table, ready for her subtle bow of acknowledgement when he thanked key contributors. "Tonight," he continued, "we've raised over £7 million, a milestone we didn't expect to reach so soon." The applause grew louder. Claire allowed herself a small, serene smile, but then his tone shifted. Much of that success is due to one guest, a guest who asked for no recognition, no spotlight, and no title. Someone who believes in quiet giving, in long-term impact, and in using influence not to impress but to protect. A hush fell. Claire's smile faded slightly. He came tonight not as a celebrity, not as an icon, not even as a name on the program, but as a friend, a partner, and unbeknownst to many of you, the room leaned forward. The new owner of the Royal Horizon Foundation. Claire blinked. She wasn't breathing. "Please join me in recognizing someone who's changed thousands of lives, funded schools in Kenya, rebuilt medical centers in Cambodia, and quietly transformed how we think about philanthropy in the modern world." Claire turned. He was already rising. The man in the black t-shirt, the man she had mocked, ridiculed, tried to remove, Keanu Reeves, stood slowly. He nodded politely to the prince, who stepped down from the stage and extended his hand. "Thank you for being here, Keanu." A wave of shocked applause filled the room. People turned, whispered. Phones were subtly raised. Some gasped audibly. Claire's heart pounded. Keanu didn't look at her, didn't need to. He simply nodded to the prince, said something quietly, then offered a small but unmistakably kind smile. He wasn't gloating. He didn't have to because everyone else was doing it for him. Claire sat frozen, her spine straight, her expression locked, but inside, she was shattering. The applause crashed around her like waves against stone, louder, sharper, more sustained than it should have been. Every polite clap felt like a thunderclap inside her chest. Keanu Reeves stood in the soft glow of the spotlight, exchanging a quiet word with Prince William. The two men smiled, shook hands again, and Claire sat in silence. Not one muscle in her face twitched, but inside, something fragile cracked. Not a clean break, but a slow fracture starting somewhere beneath her ribs and spreading outward until even the weight of her necklace felt unbearable. She didn't dare look around, but she didn't have to. She could feel it. The heat behind her ears, the slight rustle of someone leaning back to whisper behind a hand, the unmistakable silence of guests trying very hard not to look directly at her. Across the table, Lord Ainsworth cleared his throat. The Swiss banker reached for his wine but missed the stem by half an inch. A young woman 2 seats away looked down at her phone and let out the tiniest gasp. Claire didn't blink. Her gaze remained fixed on the white linen tablecloth, on the curve of her champagne flute, on anything that wasn't him. She tried to inhale, but the breath caught high in her throat, tight, dry, wrong. The words from the folded note replayed in her mind like a curse. Please stop. He's the owner. She had mocked him, belittled him, openly questioned whether he could afford a painting, only to discover he had funded the entire foundation behind it. And now his name was being spoken by royalty, applauded by the elite, and her name wasn't even whispered. Her reputation, carefully crafted over decades, one gala at a time, now felt thinner than the wine in her glass. She glanced to the side. Keanu had returned to his seat, still silent, still calm. And for the first time, she realized his silence wasn't emptiness, it was control. She had spent the last hour performing, and he had simply been no effort, no defense, no retaliation. And now he sat there, relaxed in a t-shirt, while the entire room tilted in his favor. Claire's fingers trembled slightly against her lap. She gripped her clutch until the leather creaked. The applause faded. People settled again, but the air had changed colder, heavier because everyone knew what she had said, what she had implied, and no one was laughing anymore. Clare Vaughn had always known how to command a room with presence. But tonight, the only thing she could hear was the subtle shift of people turning away. The music resumed softly. Conversation picked up. But at table 1, the air was no longer heavy with prestige. It felt thin, as if the room had quietly exhaled and left Claire behind. She took a measured sip of champagne, her hands steady but her pulse loud in her ears. Lord Ainsworth was now angled away, laughing with someone from tech. The Countess Bellamy offered only a thin-lipped smile before turning away. No one mentioned the man in the black t-shirt. No one said his name. And yet his presence hung in the air like fine dust, impossible to see but impossible to ignore. Sometimes the loudest person in the room is simply trying to hide how little they truly hold, and sometimes the quiet one, the overlooked, the dismissed, is the one who carries everything. If this story made you pause, reflect, or feel something, drop a number 6 in the comments and let us know. Have you ever misjudged someone and regretted it later? We're here, we're listening. Claire reached for her phone, more from instinct than need, and opened her messages. There were several. Her assistant, a foundation liaison, to journalist Soul, asking the same question without saying it directly. What happened? She didn't respond. When she looked up again, a photographer across the room was adjusting his lens, but not toward her. His camera was pointed at the opposite end of the table, where Keanu Reeves now stood in quiet conversation with Prince William. His posture relaxed, his face lit softly beneath the chandelier's glow. No flashbulb sought her out, no curious glance followed her movement. For the first time in recent memory, Claire realized she was no longer the subject of the room, not the voice it listened to, not the headline it chased. Just a woman in a silver gown, sitting very, very still. While the room turned gently toward someone else, Claire remained seated long after the applause had faded, after the wine had been poured, after Keanu Reeves returned to his seat and resumed his silence as if nothing had happened. She smiled. She sipped. She nodded at jokes she didn't hear and answered questions no one asked. It was autopilot, now grace-stitched from instinct and pride, but deep beneath the surface, panic bloomed. Not the kind that made you gasp, but the kind that made the room feel too bright, the walls too far, the chair too small. She leaned toward the woman beside her, someone from an arts committee in Vienna she barely remembered meeting last spring. Quite a reveal, wasn't it? Claire said lightly. I suppose that's what these events are about, surprises. The woman smiled, but it was the kind of smile people use when a stranger comments in an elevator. Claire tried again, shifting toward the opposite end of the table. Do you know if Keanu's involved with other foundations? He certainly made an entrance. But Lord Ainsworth only nodded vaguely, as if her voice had lost its sharpness, had been turned down to background volume. Claire could feel it now, not judgment, not outrage, but worse, dismissal. The kind that comes not from scandal, but from no longer being essential. She rose, excused herself with a graceful tilt of her chin, and stepped away from the table, weaving between clusters of guests without drawing a single eye. No one followed, no one called her name. She made her way to the mirrored hallway near the coat room where the music thinned and the air cooled. She stood there alone, staring at her reflection under the soft chandelier glow. The same gown, the same jewels, the same posture she had practiced her entire life, but something was missing. The room, the echo, the attention. Her phone buzzed in her hand again. She didn't look. From down the hall, she could still hear laughter. Keanu's voice, low and steady, Prince William chuckling. A cameraman called his name, and the flash lit the corridor like distant lightning. Claire didn't go back. There would be no dramatic exit, no redemption speech, just the quiet truth that she, Clare Vaughn, once untouchable, had spoken too soon, too loud, to the wrong man. And now the world wasn't listening because someone else already had the microphone. Sometimes the loudest person in the room is simply trying to hide how little they truly hold. And sometimes the quiet one, the overlooked, the dismissed, is the one who carries everything. Claire thought power came from posture and pearls, but real power speaks softly and lets others expose themselves. If this story made you pause, reflect, or feel something, drop a number 6 in the comments and let us know. Have you ever misjudged someone and regretted it later? We're here, we're listening. Remember, true character isn't worn, it's lived. Subscribe for more stories that remind us of the power of humility, the impact of kindness, and the moments that redefine who we are.